The official letter from the Department of the Treasury was cool and crisp in my hands, the paper far more substantial than any paycheck I had ever received. The final number on the IRS Whistleblower Award was staggering, a figure with enough zeros to make my vision swim, all of it my reward for costing my former company a whopping $2.5 million in fines. But to understand how I ended up with this life-changing piece of paper, a direct consequence of their own greed, we have to go back to the beginning. Before the lawyers and the audits, I was the model employee at Innovatech Solutions. I wasn't just a senior project manager, I was a true believer. I drank the company Kool-Aid, which was often served alongside artisanal cold brew and catered lunches in our gleaming, open-plan office. I lived and breathed our motto, "Build the future today." For me, that wasn't just a catchy phrase on a motivational poster. It was a personal mandate. I was the first one in, my keyboard clicking before the sun had fully risen over the city skyline, and often the last one out, my screen's glow a lone beacon in the deepening twilight. My domain was the Phoenix Project, a complete overhaul of our flagship software suite. It was a monstrous undertaking that had chewed up and spat out 2 previous managers. When they handed it to me, it was 6 months behind schedule and hemorrhaging money. I didn't just manage it, I resuscitated it. I spent my nights untangling snarled code dependencies with the engineering team and my weekends creating new budget models that clawed back thousands of dollars in vendor overspending. I remember one particular Tuesday after a 72-hour non-stop push to fix a critical bug before a client demo. I fell asleep on a beanbag chair in the break room, my laptop still warm on my chest. I didn't do it for the overtime. We were all salaried, and overtime was a dirty word. I did it because I believed in the project and the promises that had been made to me. The gatekeeper of those promises was Brenda, our head of people operations. She was a master of the corporate smile, an unnervingly bright expression that never quite reached her eyes. She glided through the office in expensive sheath dresses, her voice a smooth, placating hum that could deliver devastating news without ever technically sounding negative. She loved to use words like synergy, alignment, and, my personal favorite, family. After the Phoenix Project launched not just on time, but with features that exceeded every initial projection, I scheduled a meeting with her. I had been verbally promised a promotion to director and a significant compensation package to reflect the new title. I walked into her glass-walled office feeling confident, my list of accomplishments practically glowing in my mind. "Sarah, come in, sit," Brenda beamed, gesturing to a low-slung chair that felt deliberately designed to put you at a disadvantage. "We are all just so incredibly thrilled. The numbers on Phoenix are just, wow, you really knocked it out of the park." "Thank you, Brenda," I said, keeping my own smile steady. I'm proud of what my team and I were able to accomplish. It's why I wanted to follow up on our conversations about the director role. Now that the launch is a success, I was hoping to formalize the transition. She leaned forward, clasping her hands on her polished desk. Her expression shifted into one of faux sincere gravity. "Absolutely, and we so appreciate you stepping up. That's what we love about you, Sarah. You have that all in spirit. You don't wait to be asked, you just do." "I appreciate that. So regarding the compensation and title?" Brenda held up a perfectly manicured hand. "You know, what makes Innovatech so different is that we're not a typical company, we're a family. We're all in the trenches together, building something amazing. The reward is the work itself, isn't it? It's about the mission." She paused, letting the manipulative sentiment hang in the air. "We need to see that passion, that commitment, continue. People who are focused on titles and money, well, they sometimes lose sight of the bigger picture." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I don't think asking for what was discussed is losing sight of the picture. I've more than proven my commitment. "And we value it more than you know," she chirped, her bright smile snapping back into place. "Let's just keep this amazing momentum going. We'll circle back on the formal stuff at the end of the fiscal year. Just keep crushing it for us." She stood up, a clear signal that the meeting was over. I was being dismissed, My 18-hour days and saved from the brink project, reduced to a pat on the head and a vague promise to circle back. As I walked out of her office, the praise she'd laid on so thick felt like a sticky, suffocating film. I wasn't part of the family. I was just the help. True to Brenda's word, I kept crushing it. For the next 6 months, I buried myself in my work, treating her vague promise like a signed contract. I took every opportunity she threw my way, which was corporate speak for thankless tasks no one else wanted. I optimized post-launch support, mentored junior PMs, and even drafted the initial framework for Phoenix 2.0. I did it all with a forced smile, clinging to the belief that my hard work would be recognized, that the family would eventually welcome me to the head of the table. The end of the fiscal year loomed like a finish line, the culmination of all my sacrifice. The announcement came not in a meeting, but in a company-wide email from the CEO. The subject line was, "Celebrating our success and building our future leadership." My heart hammered against my ribs as I clicked it open. The email was full of the usual corporate platitudes about a record-breaking year, citing the successful launch of the Phoenix project as a cornerstone of that success, my project. Then came the list of promotions. I scrolled down, my eyes scanning for my name under the new director's heading. I saw Director of Product Innovation, the very title I had been promised. But the name next to it wasn't mine. It was Mark Renshaw. Mark, a man whose primary contribution to the Phoenix project was leaving coffee rings on my project plans and asking if the catered lunch had arrived yet. He was a master of schmoozing, of laughing at the right executives, jokes, of being a great culture fit. He hadn't worked a single weekend. He'd never seen the office after 6 p.m., and he had just been given my promotion, my title, my $50,000 raise, and the 6-figure stock package that came with it. All of it was his. I just stood there at my desk, the celebratory email glowing on my screen, my blood turning to ice. I could hear the faint cheer from Mark's desk across the open plan office. I remember thinking, how did I let this happen? It's a feeling of being completely blindsided that I'm sure some of you know all too well. If stories like this resonate with you, by the way, and you haven't already, maybe take a second to subscribe. You're going to want to hear how this ends. I didn't storm over to Brenda's office. I walked, each step deliberate and cold. The cheerful office buzz, the ping-pong table, the artisanal cold brew tap. It all seemed like a cheap set for a dark comedy. Her door was open. She saw me coming and her corporate smile flickered, just for a second. "Sarah," she said, her tone cautious, "got a minute?" I stepped inside, leaving the door open. Let the whole family hear. "Mark Renshaw?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Director of Product Innovation?" Brenda sighed, a theatrical display of disappointment, as if I were the one letting her down. "Look, Sarah, Mark has shown tremendous growth in his strategic thinking. He's a real people person. We needed someone with strong soft skills for that role." Soft skills? The words felt like ash in my mouth. I resuscitated a dying project and delivered it ahead of schedule, saving this company millions. Mark's biggest strategic decision was choosing which flavor of LaCroix to stock in the fridge. This isn't about soft skills, Brenda. This is about the promotion you promised me. She leaned back, her expression hardening. The placating hum was gone, replaced by a chilling frankness. "We had conversations, Sarah. Nothing was ever promised. You seem to have a very transactional view of your role here." "Transactional?" I laughed. A sharp, bitter sound. I slept on a beanbag chair for this company. I sacrificed my nights, my weekends. I did that because I was told it would be rewarded. I was told there would be a promotion and a compensation package to match. That's when the mask didn't just slip. She ripped it off and threw it away. She looked at me, her eyes flat and cold as polished stones, and delivered the blow that would change everything. "Honestly, Sarah, your attitude about this whole thing has been very grasping. It proved to us you weren't ready for leadership. People who are constantly asking, 'What's in it for me?' don't get to be leaders here." She stood, looking down at me from across her desk. "Frankly, you don't deserve it. You don't deserve it." The words hung in the air, sucking all the oxygen out of the room. After everything I had given, every sacrifice I had made, I didn't deserve it. It wasn't about Mark's soft skills or my transactional nature. It was simpler than that. They had taken what they needed from me, and now I was being discarded. I wasn't family. I wasn't even the help. I was just a resource that had been fully depleted. As I turned and walked away from her office, the model employee, the true believer, died right there on the polished concrete floor. And in her place, something new and far more dangerous began to stir. For a long moment, I just stared at her, the echo of her words, "You don't deserve it," ricocheting around the inside of my skull. The coldness in her eyes was absolute, but the true believer in me, the rule follower, wasn't quite dead yet. It was twitching, making one last desperate attempt to find logic in the wreckage. I took a breath, forcing my voice to remain level, professional. This was just a negotiation that had gone sour. There were other avenues. There had to be. "Brenda, I'm not trying to be grasping," I said, my tone more pleading than I intended. "I'm trying to be a partner. I have emails, project documentation, performance reviews. All of it points to a level of contribution far exceeding my current role. It also documents our conversations about this specific promotion. If you won't honor the verbal agreement we had, perhaps we can bring in a third party from HR or even the CEO's office. I'm sure Mr. Harrison would want to ensure that the key player on his cornerstone project is being treated fairly according to company policy." I thought the mention of the CEO and official policy might give her pause. It was a polite, corporate-approved way of saying, "I can make this a problem for you." It was my last card, played with a trembling hand. Brenda's hard expression didn't soften. It did something worse. It cracked, and a sound I had never heard from her before spilled out, a laugh. It wasn't a humorous laugh. It was a short, sharp bark of utter contempt. It was the sound of a predator looking at prey that had foolishly tried to reason with it. She leaned forward, planting her palms on the desk, the sound of her expensive bracelets clinking against the polished wood. "Oh, Sarah," she said, shaking her head as if I were a hopelessly naive child. "You still think this is a meritocracy? You think your little folder of emails matters?" She laughed again, a little longer this time, the sound sharp and cruel. "You are an at-will employee. We can promote you, fire you, or have you spend the rest of your career updating spreadsheets for any reason or no reason at all. There is no fair. There is only what the company decides." She picked up a pen and tapped it on a notepad, a gesture of final board dismissal. "You are not a partner, Sarah. You are an employee, a well-compensated one, I might add. So you have two choices. You can go back to your desk and continue to do the job you are paid for, or you can find the door. Either way, this conversation is over. Now I have a meeting." I was frozen. My last card hadn't just been trumped. It had been lit on fire and flicked back in my face. I turned and walked out of her office, the open door I'd left as a statement of defiance now feeling like the frame of my own public humiliation. The walk back to my desk was the longest of my life. The office, once my kingdom, was now a hostile alien landscape. The cheerful yellow accent walls seemed to mock me. The sound of the ping-pong ball from the break room felt like a personal insult. I could feel dozens of pairs of eyes on my back. Or maybe that was just my own paranoia wrapping itself around me like a shroud. I passed Mark's desk. He was on the phone, laughing, his feet kicked up on a box. He'd already decorated his new territory. I finally reached my station and sank into my chair. My monitor was still on, the CEO's email glowing with its list of new leaders. My name wasn't on it. My name would never be on it. She laughed at me. The thought was a repeating, punishing rhythm in my head. She laughed. All those nights. All those weekends. The 72-hour push. The beanbag chair. The missed dinners. The canceled plans. The promises to friends that I'd make it up to them soon. For what? To be laughed at. To be told I was a transactional, grasping child who didn't understand how the world worked A wave of pure, suffocating panic washed over me. They had me. They really, truly had me. I couldn't quit. I had a mortgage, student loans, a life built on the foundation of this salary. I couldn't stay. Every single day would be a reminder of this moment, of Mark in my job, of Brenda's contemptuous smile. I was trapped. The Milan family I had given my life to for years had revealed itself to be a cage, and I had just been shown the bars. I felt a desperate, clawing need for air, for escape, but there was no way out. I was just a resource, a line item on a budget, and I had been fully, utterly spent. I rested my forehead against the cool surface of my desk, the plastic pressing into my skin, and for the first time since I'd started at Innovatech, I had no idea what to do next. My forehead rested on the cool, smooth plastic of my desk, the world reduced to the muffled sounds of the office and the faint floral scent of the all-purpose cleaner the night crew used. Panic was a physical thing, a crushing weight on my chest, a frantic buzzing in my ears. Trapped. The word echoed in the hollow space Brenda had carved out inside me. I was trapped by my mortgage, by my ambition, by the simple, brutal fact that I had nowhere else to go. The model employee was dead, but the woman who was left was paralyzed. For an hour, maybe two, I didn't move. I just sat there, marinating in my own humiliation. But then slowly, something else began to curdle in the pit of my stomach. It was colder than panic and sharper than despair. It was rage, a quiet, glacial anger that started to freeze the panic, giving it hard, sharp edges. Brenda's mocking laugh played on a loop in my head. You think your little folder of emails matters? She was right. My proof of performance, my documented accomplishments, my emails, they were all useless in her world, in the world of Innovatech. They played a different game, with different rules I was never meant to understand. Fine, if my rules didn't matter, I would learn to play by theirs. The first rule was that power was the only thing that counted. Brenda had it. I didn't. I needed to find some. My hands moved, almost of their own accord, to my keyboard. I wasn't going to quit. Not yet. I wasn't going to work either. I was going to do what I did best. I was going to audit. I was going to go through every file, every folder, every line item of the Phoenix Project, the monument, to my own stupidity, and I was going to scrub it clean of my identity. I started with the master budget, the sprawling spreadsheet that had been my Bible for over a year. I built this thing. I knew every cell, every formula, every vendor. As I scrolled through the final post-launch accounting, my eyes snagged on a familiar, irritating name, Apex Strategic Consulting. Their line item was enormous, over $500,000 for the year, all categorized under external R&D. I remembered Apex. I had tried to cut their contract 3 times. Their invoices were a joke, just single lines for synergy assessment or innovation pathways for a flat $50,000 a pop. No timesheets, no reports, no deliverables. Every time I flagged it, I was shut down. Finance told me to leave it alone. Brenda herself once told me it was a critical C-suite level partnership and to stop questioning it. Back then, I had obeyed. I was a good soldier. Now I was a saboteur looking for a bomb. Fueled by a new, vicious curiosity, I started digging. I opened the secure vendor folder on the server. The contract for Apex was a 1-page document, a masterpiece of corporate vagueness. The work was to be performed as requested. The payment terms were simply quarterly. It was signed by our CFO, Michael Vance. Next, the invoices. All identical, all for huge, round numbers. All approved and fast-tracked by Vance's office. There were no attached reports, no summaries of work, just invoices and payment confirmations. I opened one of the payment confirmations, a simple wire transfer receipt. My eyes scanned the details. Innovatech Solutions to Apex Strategic Consulting, LLC. Standard stuff. Then I saw the destination account. My breath caught in my throat. The account name wasn't Apex Strategic Consulting. It was the Vance Family Trust. Vance, Michael Vance, our CFO. The office noise, the ping pong ball, the distant chatter, it all faded away. The world narrowed to the glowing pixels on my screen. I felt a tremor of something electric, something that felt terrifyingly like hope. I opened a browser and did a public record search for Apex Strategic Consulting, LLC. It was registered to a P.O. box at a strip mall mail center, a shell, a ghost, a pipeline for Michael Vance to siphon $500,000 from my project budget directly into his family trust. And the classification. That was the real masterstroke, external R&D. I wasn't an accountant, but I'd spent enough time in budget meetings to know that R&D expenses were special. A quick search confirmed it. I found the IRS webpage, my heart hammering against my ribs. There it was, in black and white. Title 26, U.S. Code, Section 41, Credit for Increasing Research Activities. The government gave massive tax credits to companies for investing in research and development. To qualify, the spending had to be for the discovery of information which is technological in nature, and for a new or improved business component. Vance wasn't just stealing from the company. He was using the theft to fraudulently claim a tax credit from the IRS. He was making the U.S. Treasury pay for his personal slush fund. I leaned back in my chair, the plastic creaking in the sudden silence of my world. The cage Brenda had put me in dissolved. The bars melted away. This wasn't a little folder of emails. This wasn't a he said, she said argument about a verbal promise. This was a document trail. This was wire fraud. This was tax evasion. Brenda had told me I was a well-compensated employee. She was about to find out exactly how well compensated I was going to be. The IRS whistleblower office pays a percentage of the collected proceeds, and I had a feeling the proceeds from this were going to be very, very significant. She had laughed at me. Now, I had a weapon that could bring the whole house of cards down, and I was the only one who knew how to use it. For a long time, I just sat there, the hum of my computer a low thrum against a sudden, ringing silence in my ears. The world outside my monitor had ceased to exist. There was only the digital breadcrumb trail leading from my project to a shell company, to our CFO's family trust, to the U.S. tax code. The rage that had been a wild, thrashing thing inside me began to cool and solidify, hardening into something far more useful, a plan. The panic was gone, burned away by the cold fire of purpose. Brenda thought I was a resource to be depleted. Vance thought I was a budget line to be exploited. They were both wrong. I was a project manager, and I had just been handed the project of a lifetime. The next morning, I put on the mask. I became the defeated employee Brenda wanted me to be. I walked into the office with my shoulders slightly slumped, my gaze fixed on the floor. I offered no cheerful good mornings, made no eye contact. I was a ghost at my own desk. I answered emails with curt, one-sentence replies. I updated the spreadsheets for post-launch support with mechanical precision. I was enacting the most difficult performance of my life, malicious compliance. I did the job I was paid for, exactly as Brenda had instructed, and nothing more. I was a cog, a drone, a transactional employee. I was everything she had accused me of being, and it was the perfect camouflage. My days were for them, my nights were for me. When the office emptied out, and the only light was the cold, blue glow of the monitors and the distant sweep of headlights on the street below, my real work began. I became a digital phantom, moving silently through the company's servers. The skills I had honed building the Phoenix Project, meticulous documentation, obsessive organization, and eye for critical dependencies were now being turned against its creators. I wasn't just downloading files. I was building a fortress of evidence. I started with a cheap USB drive, bought with cash from a corner pharmacy. Each night I'd copy over another piece of the puzzle, the Apex Strategic Consulting contract. Every single one of their vague multi-thousand-dollar invoices, the corresponding wire transfer confirmations, each one bearing the damning name, the Vance Family Trust. Then I went deeper. I pulled my own performance reviews, the ones glowing with praise for my budget management. I found the email chains where I had questioned the Apex expense, and Brenda herself had told me to stand down, calling it a, quote, C-suite level partnership. I even found the server logs that showed Vance's administrative assistant was the only person to ever access the Apex vendor folder besides me. I saved everything, encrypted the drive, and took it home with me each night, a small plastic time bomb in my pocket. Once I had the what, I needed the how. I wasn't a lawyer or a tax expert. I spent a weekend researching, creating a new email address at a public library, and using their computers. I found a law firm in D.C. that specialized in IRS whistleblower cases. On my lunch break the following Monday, I walked 10 blocks to a park, sat on a cold bench, and made the call on a prepaid burner phone. A lawyer, a calm, measured man named David, listened patiently as I laid out the basics, never giving my name or the company's. He didn't sound surprised. He sounded practiced. He told me about IRS Form 211, Application for Award for Original Information. He explained that the key wasn't just the raw data, but the narrative. I had to connect the dots for them to tell a clear and compelling story of the fraud. You're the project manager, he'd said. Lay out the project plan for them. Make it impossible for them to ignore. A week after that call, the package was ready. A detailed narrative, cross-referenced with every piece of evidence on the encrypted drive. I sent it via registered mail from a post office across town. The mechanism was set. The trap was sprung. All I had to do now was wait. The gloating came 2 weeks later. I was in the break room, refilling my water bottle, trying to pretend the cheerful yellow walls didn't make my skin crawl. Brenda glided in, her smile as bright and artificial as ever. She'd been watching me, I knew, watching my quiet compliance, my defeated posture, and she was satisfied. "Sarah," she said, her voice dripping with faux concern, "I just wanted to say I'm glad to see you've adjusted your attitude. It was a little rocky there for a bit, but you've settled back in nicely." She leaned in, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "It's for the best. Sometimes, in a career, you just have to accept your level and learn to be happy there. It's a valuable lesson. You don't deserve it. Know your place." The same message, wrapped in a different condescending package. The old me would have argued. The old me would have felt the sting of tears. But the old me was long gone. I simply looked at her, letting the silence stretch. I didn't flinch. I didn't frown. I just held her gaze. Then, I let the corner of my mouth lift in a tiny, knowing smile. It was a small, private thing, but it was the truest expression I had worn in months. I didn't say a word. I just turned, screwed the cap on my water bottle, and walked away, leaving her standing there by the artisanal cold brew tap, her perfect corporate smile faltering for just a second, a flicker of confusion in her cold, flat eyes. She had no idea the war had already been won. The waiting was the hardest part. 6 months, 183 days of playing the ghost, of showing up and disappearing into my work, a model of defeated compliance. The anger that had once been a bonfire was now a pilot light, a tiny, constant flame of purpose that kept me going. I performed my duties, collected my paychecks, and watched Brenda glide through the office, confident in the cage she had built for me. She had no idea I had spent the past half year methodically forging the key. It happened on a Tuesday. The sky outside was a dull, indifferent gray. I was updating a status tracker, the clicking of my own keyboard, a monotonous rhythm in the familiar office hum. The air was thick with the scent of microwaved popcorn from the break room and the low murmur of a dozen different conversations. Normal. It was all so painfully normal. Then the elevator doors slid open, and the normality ended. Two people, a man and a woman, stepped out. They weren't clients. They lacked the eager-to-be-impressed look of potential partners. They wore plain, dark suits that were functional, not fashionable. They carried themselves with a placid, unshakable authority, their eyes sweeping the open-plan office not with curiosity, but with assessment. They moved with a quiet purpose of predators who know they are at the top of the food chain. The low hum of the office began to falter as heads lifted from monitors. The popcorn-scented air suddenly felt thin, charged with a new, anxious electricity. They didn't stop at the reception desk. They walked directly toward the glass-walled offices of the executive suite, their path taking them right past my desk. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the icy calm I forced onto my face. I kept my eyes on my screen, a statue of diligent mediocrity. I watched their reflections in my monitor as they stopped at Brenda's door. She was on the phone, laughing at something. She saw them, held up a single, dismissive finger to indicate they should wait, and continued her call. The agents didn't move. They didn't sigh. They just stood there, two pillars of bureaucratic patience, their very stillness, a terrifying display of power. Brenda's laugh faltered. She ended the call abruptly. Her corporate smile snapped into place as she waved them in. "So sorry to keep you. How can I help?" Her voice was a bright, welcoming chime. The agent stepped inside, leaving the door slightly ajar. I couldn't hear their initial words, but I could see Brenda's posture shift. Her welcoming lean-in stiffened. Her smile froze, then melted away, replaced by a tight, confused frown. She was gesturing, talking quickly, her hands fluttering in the air. The placating hum was back, her primary weapon, but it was having no effect. The agents were stone. The man said something, and Brenda flinched as if he'd slapped her. Then, the man's voice cut through the now silent office. "We also need to speak with Michael Vance." Brenda looked stricken. She glanced out of her glass cage, her eyes wide and searching, as if looking for an escape route. She saw the entire office staring, rapt. She saw me. Her eyes, full of panicked confusion, locked with mine for a split second. I gave her nothing. I just looked back, my face a blank canvas. She picked up her desk phone and mumbled into it. A minute later, Vance, our portly CFO, bustled over, an annoyed look on his face. "Brenda, what's so urgent?" He saw the agents and his expression soured further. "Can I help you?" This time, the woman spoke. Her voice was quiet, but carried with absolute clarity in the dead-still room. "We're from the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. We're here to discuss a whistleblower report filed regarding fraudulent claims made under U.S. Code, Title 26, Section 41. Vance paled. The color drained from his face, leaving behind a waxy gray sheen. I don't know what you're talking about. Perhaps the name Apex Strategic Consulting will refresh your memory, the male agent said, his tone flat. Or the Vance Family Trust? Vance made a small, choking sound. He stumbled back a step, looking at Brenda for help, but her own facade had completely shattered. The master of corporate smiles was gone. In her place was a woman staring at the wreckage of her career. Her mouth was slightly open, her eyes darting between Vance and the agents. This was a problem she couldn't solve with synergy or a vague promise to circle back. Then her frantic gaze swung back out to the office floor. It scanned past Mark Renshaw, who was frozen at his desk. It scanned past the rows of silent, staring employees. It landed on me again, and this time, she understood. The confusion in her eyes curdled into a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. She finally saw the key. She saw the trap. She saw the quiet, defeated employee who had sat just outside her door for 6 months. She saw the smile I had given her in the break room, and in a devastating flash of insight, she finally knew what it meant. I didn't smile back. I just held her gaze, letting her see the truth. You thought my folder of emails didn't matter. You were right. This matters more. "We'll need to use a conference room," the female agent said, her voice cutting through the tension. "It It wasn't a request, it was an order. They flanked Brenda and Vance, who looked like they were being escorted to their own execution, and guided them away, the walk of shame. As they passed, I finally allowed myself to breathe. The pilot light of rage inside me went out. Its purpose served. The cage was broken. The lions were loose. And I, the transactional, grasping, undeserving employee, was about to be very, very well compensated. The moment the conference room door clicked shut behind the agents, Brenda and Vance, the office erupted in a frantic, sibilant whisper. It was like a spell had been broken. People stood up from their desks, clustering in small, anxious groups. Eyes darted from the sealed conference room to me, then quickly away, as if looking at me was somehow dangerous. I had become a walking personification of consequence. I ignored them all. With deliberate, unhurried movements, I began packing my personal belongings into a cardboard box I retrieved from the supply closet. The half-dead succulent, the framed photo of my college friends, the chipped coffee mug, each item felt like a relic from a different life. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. "We need to talk. Please, don't leave. Brenda," of course. She was trapped in a room with federal agents, and her first instinct was to try and manage me. I finished packing, placed the box on my chair, and walked out of the office without a word. I didn't look back at the glass-walled conference room. I didn't need to. I could feel Brenda's hateful stare burning into my back. The call came an hour later as I was sitting in a sterile, overpriced hotel bar 10 blocks from the office. I had ordered a glass of expensive scotch, the amber liquid a stark contrast to the free-flowing artisanal cold brew I'd left behind. "Sarah?" Her voice was a ragged whisper, stripped of all its smooth corporate polish. The placating hum had been replaced by the grating sound of pure panic. "Brenda?" I said, my voice as cool and smooth as a scotch. "Where are you? I need to see you, please. We have to fix this." The word "we" was a bitter joke. "I'm busy," I said, taking a slow sip. "No, you don't understand," she hissed, her voice cracking. "They're freezing everything. Vance is gone. They escorted him out a different way. The board is in chaos. They're talking about criminal charges. For him, for anyone involved. Sarah, you have to tell them it was a mistake. You have to call them off." I almost laughed, the sheer, breathtaking arrogance of it. She still thought this was a personnel issue she could manage, a misunderstanding she could smooth over. "That's not how the IRS works, Brenda. This isn't a bad performance review you can delete from the system. This is a freight train." "Then stop it. You started it," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "They'll ruin the company, my career. Sarah, I have a mortgage. I have kids. Please. I'll get you the promotion. I'll get you the money. Whatever you want. Just fix it." There it was, the begging. It wasn't satisfying. It was just pathetic. She was the predator, now caught in a bigger trap, mewling for the prey she had mauled, to come and set her free. "Meet me at the bar in the lobby of the Grand Hyatt in 20 minutes, I said, and hung up. She arrived in 18, looking like she'd been pulled through a hedge backward. Her usually immaculate hair was disheveled, her makeup was smudged, and the expensive sheath dress was rumpled. She slid into the booth opposite me, her eyes wide and desperate. "Okay, I'm here," she said, breathless. "What do I have to do?" I leaned forward, my hands clasped on the table, mimicking the pose she'd struck in her office all those months ago. "Let's be very clear," I said, my voice low and even. "There is no fixing the Vance situation. You can't put that fire out. You can only hope to survive it. What I'm about to offer you is not a way to fix the past. It is a way to prevent your future from getting infinitely worse." Her brow furrowed in confusion. Worse? How could it get worse? This was the moment, the power move. Because while I was digging into Vance's creative accounting, I said I found other things, interesting things. For example, I noticed that nearly our entire quality assurance department is staffed by independent contractors. Contractors who are required to be in the office from 9 to 5, use company equipment, and are managed directly by Innovatech employees. Contractors who have been with us for years. The last traces of color drained from her face. This wasn't about Vance anymore. This was about her. As head of people operations, employee classification was her domain. That's standard industry practice, she stammered. It's also felony tax evasion, Brenda. Misclassifying employees to avoid paying payroll taxes. A whole separate world of trouble. A whole different report I could file. A whole new investigation. I let that hang in the air, a second guillotine poised to drop. So this is what's going to happen. This isn't a negotiation. This is the terms of my severance package. I pushed a napkin across the table. I had already written the number on it. That is the amount that will be wired to my account by noon tomorrow. It covers the director's salary I was promised, the stock options I earned, and extensive damages for the coordinated campaign of professional sabotage and bad faith dealing I was subjected to. You'll also expunge my personnel file and provide a neutral reference. She stared at the number on the napkin, her mouth agape. This is insane. The company can't. I can't authorize this. You'll find a way, I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. Because if that money is not in my account, I'm going to have a very interesting follow-up call with my friends at the IRS. I'll tell them to take a closer look at your department. Pay me my settlement, Brenda, and maybe I won't feel the civic duty to report the second, far more personal, violation. After all, you wouldn't want to face a federal investigation and a class action lawsuit from 24 misclassified employees all at once, would you? I stood up, leaving the napkin on the table. The scotch was finished. Her face was a mask of pure horror. The corporate smile was gone forever, replaced by the slack-jawed terror of someone who had just been utterly and completely checkmated. It was a valuable lesson, Brenda, I said, echoing her words from the break room. Sometimes you just have to accept your level and learn to be happy there. I turned and walked away, leaving her alone in the quiet bar with the bill and the impossible price of my silence. The money from Innovatech didn't arrive with a dramatic flourish. There was no briefcase, no tense meeting. It came the next day, just before noon, as a simple push notification on my phone from my banking app. Direct deposit received. I tapped it open, and there it was. A number so large it looked like a typo, the exact figure I had scrawled on that cocktail napkin. It was my salary, my stock options, my pain, and my silence, all converted into a clean digital wire transfer. I stared at the number, not with glee, but with a profound sense of finality. The transaction was complete. The account was settled. I closed the app, finished my coffee, and booked a one-way ticket to a place with no boardrooms and no artisanal cold brew. I learned about Brenda's fate 6 months later from an article in an industry trade publication. The class action lawsuit I had threatened her with had materialized anyway. A few of the independent contractors in the QA department, emboldened by Vance's very public downfall, had found a lawyer of their own. The article detailed how Innovatech had settled for a massive sum and fired their entire senior HR leadership for gross negligence. Brenda's name was mentioned specifically. I looked her up on LinkedIn out of a morbid sense of curiosity. Her profile was barren. The gleaming title of Head of People Operations was gone, replaced by a void. Her name had become synonymous with scandal, making her unemployable in the world she had so ruthlessly ruled. She hadn't just lost her job, she had lost her entire corporate identity. She had been rendered a resource fully depleted. And then, almost 2 years after I walked out of that office for the last time, the letter arrived, the one from the Department of the Treasury. Holding it now, the paper feels heavy, substantial in a way that no paycheck ever did. The final award from the IRS whistleblower office is, frankly, obscene. It's a life-breaking, life-remaking amount of money. It's the government's thank you note for bringing a tax cheat to justice. So what does a life remade look like? It's quieter than you'd think. The first thing I did was pay off my mortgage. I clicked a button, and a weight I had carried since my 20s vanished. I paid off the last of my student loans. I set up a trust for my parents. I didn't buy a mansion or a sports car. What I bought was freedom. Freedom is waking up when the sun, not an alarm, tells you to. It's the luxury of reading a book on a Tuesday morning without a single flicker of guilt. It's the ability to say no without fear. I don't have a job, not in the traditional sense. I don't answer to anyone. The woman who once slept on a beanbag chair for a project now sleeps in a small house by the sea, the sound of the waves, a constant, soothing replacement for the hum of a server room. Brenda's words still echo sometimes, but they've lost their sting. You don't deserve it. She was wrong. I deserve the promotion. I deserve the compensation. And I deserve this, not just the money, but the peace that came with it. I earned it, not in those 72-hour pushes, but in the moment, I decided to stop playing by their rules and start enforcing my own. They built a cage of corporate platitudes and at-will employment, but they forgot that I was the project manager. I knew how to read the blueprints, and I knew where all the demolition charges were hidden. This was my story, but I know I'm not the only one who has been told to know their place, to be grateful for what they're given. If hearing about how the tables can be turned is something that matters to you, if you believe in the value of pulling back the curtain, you might want to stick around. Be sure to subscribe, because there are always more stories that need to be told.